Welcome to our small and backyard flock seminar series. This month we have with us Andy Larson from the University of Illinois. He's going to talk to us a little bit about small farm marketing research, which is an important part of making a successful business plan. Prior to returning to the University of Illinois as an extension educator in food systems and small farms, Andy worked for 6 years as the small farm specialist for Iowa State. And with programs on planning, growing, and marketing for alternative agriculture enterprises on both the commercial and lifestyle scale. He also worked jointly with ISU's Beginning Farmer Center and coordinated the Iowa SARE Professional Development Program. Now, Andy has recently returned to his roots in Illinois and lives on an acreage in northern Illinois near the family cattle and crop farm on which he was born and raised. He's helped with his wife and kids and add to the family business with a poultry enterprise. So without further ado, Andy, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Greg. Hi, folks. Glad to be with you today. I think this is the second small and backyard poultry flocks extension webinar I've done, e-extension webinar I've done. Glad to do it. Hope that we get a lot of people to start thinking about some of the business and marketing aspects of their small flock enterprises. I'm going to be presenting this market research presentation as if I'm presenting to essentially small scale and beginning poultry producers who are looking to get into the market for poultry meat or eggs and figure out exactly what their marketplace looks like. And part of the reason that I feel like I have some authority to talk about this is that my wife and I have a small-scale poultry enterprise ourselves. We have 600 laying hens out on pasture producing brown eggs for local farmers markets, restaurants, and retail stores. So I have had to go through some of the machinations that I'm asking you guys to go through in order to learn exactly what your marketplace is. So when you're doing market research, you start with what most everybody starts with, a Google search, and you Google market research, and what pops up but a definition from Wikipedia that says market research is any organized effort to gather information about target markets or customers. A lot of good that does you, right? So it's basically anything that you do to figure out who it is you're selling to. So you do another Google search and you start looking at something a little bit more precise, maybe food market research, and you start running across the big boys in the market research marketplace, people like Food Marketing Institute, Mintel, Hartman Group, and you very quickly run up against a paywall of several hundred to several $1,000s for most of the information that you think you might be able to get out of those folks. So you got to take one step back and you got to start thinking about market trends and how you can get some of the information about your industry without having to hire a consultant, go through a professional organization, and at least get some idea of your marketplace. So if you're beginning sort of on the macro scale, there are places where you can get relevant information about the industry for small farms and for local food systems. One of my favorite places to begin is the Ag Marketing Resource Center, that is a collaboration of universities and extension systems housed out of Iowa State that has good updated information by commodity, by product, to give you not only production information but a lot of industry trends and marketing information. And then our friends at the federal government have all sorts of marketing information. And you may think to yourself, this got to be really coarse. It's got to be really broad level. Well, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. The Ag Marketing Service, the Economic Research Service, and some of the data houses that they have their information in, you can really drill down into some specific stuff. And I'll show you here in just a minute. The other place when you're trying to figure out people what it is they're buying, how much they're spending, how often, for what reason. That information is out there too. The United States Census Bureau has a lot of it. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has something they call their Consumer Expenditure Survey. Very, very useful piece of information. And if you're looking at the recorded version of this, all of these graphics are linked to their respective sources. Like I was saying, as far as drilling down, you can get some pretty interesting information about market trends, even from the feds. So there are weekly, monthly, quarterly, occasional reports from a lot of different branches of the USDA that can give you some pretty specific information. So, for example, it's interesting to know that after a major egg shortage last year with the bird flu epidemic that we had going around many parts of the upper Midwest, you can see that egg prices are back down on that graph on the lower left-hand side. Most of our most conventional eggs in dozens are selling for around $1 or less. There is information about different colors, different specialty features. On the lower right-hand side, you can see how much of the market is represented by organic, omega-3, cage-free, vegetarian-fed, etc. Information about poultry meat. There's lots of stuff that especially the AMS puts together that can give you a good bead on what your marketplace is doing right now and how it's changed over the course of the past year or two. Why do market research? This all sounds really big, really bland, sorting through a lot of data. Well, I gotta tell you, this isn't the most difficult thing in the world. It's just to answer some pretty important but also very simple questions. What's your product? Who's your customer? Where's your marketplace? And what is your price? It's not rocket science here, folks, but it will force some of us overly polite, non-confrontational Midwesterners to get out of our little politeness bubble and ask people about things like, what are you going to buy? How much are you going to pay? And we'll have some nice ways to do that without feeling too pushy, aggressive, or over the top. So these are the 4 questions that we're going to attempt to answer with this presentation here over the course of the next half hour or so. And they might look pretty familiar to people out there that are fans of the 4 Ps. Pun, sorry. Dad joke for y'all. Product, price, place, and promotion. If you haven't taken any semester-long marketing classes, you might not be familiar with the term the marketing mix, but it's one of those fancy jargonized terms for knowing these 4 little bits about your marketplace. So, in order to figure out your marketplace, you first have to be quite familiar with exactly what it is that you're selling. And that may sound weird. Like, what do you mean, what it is that I'm selling? I'm selling chicken. I'm selling turkey meat. I'm selling eggs. Well, yeah, that's the commodity that you're selling. But that commodity has, along with it, a value proposition to the customer that you're targeting. There's specific characteristics or benefits that come along. And for example, a physical attribute might be the weight. It might be the color. It might be the general size. Credence attributes are things that you can't tell by your 5 senses necessarily of looking at it, feeling it, tasting it, touching it. So for example, organic or free range or cage-free or whatever. Those are going to be credence attributes, but still might have just as much influence on the consumer's buying decision. The other thing that you got to think about is if you're not just selling to end consumers, then some of the things that you might want to tout as far as your value proposition are actually services. What problems are you solving, for example, for a restaurant or for a retail store? How are you getting them into different markets, getting them different customers to walk in the door? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here in the near future. So what exactly am I selling? I'm selling eggs. All right, but I'm selling fresh, hand-gathered, grade A, brown eggs laid in nests by happy hens that free range on pasture on a local family farm. So all of these different pieces of terminology, all of these different characteristics are going to be a little value add. It's going to be something that differentiates my value proposition from that of the commodity white egg that you get at Walmart. So this is a more exact layout of what it is that I'm selling and the services that I'm providing. What is that worth? Well, you can actually tell if those characteristics, those pieces of terminology that you're ascribing to your product actually have a dollar value associated with them. Maybe not directly, but you can at least intuit that from some of the information. This is more AMS information, their market news. And again, I'm using eggs as an example. A lot of this will go into chicken or turkey or any of the other poultry products that you guys might be producing. And you can pull up data from them. So for example, I looked up the Midwest specialty shell egg market, the different descriptions, including cage-free, vegetarian, fed, and omega-3s, and looked at what was the average price associated with those different characteristics. So that I can see if the weighted average price, for example, let's see, we'll pull the high one here. If I can mark it with my pen. So here we've got a $4.58 price point right there for average omega-3 brown extra large eggs, only in 5 stores. And then there's a lower price point directly below it for the vegetarian fed of $1.88. So you can see that these different characteristics are going to have different values ascribed to them by virtue of marketplace that they're selling in and the characteristics that they possess. Whoops, and it looks like I've got to erase some little circles here, folks. Here we go. So that is, what is your product? Okay, what is the commodity I'm selling? What are the attributes associated? What are the services? And what are those different pieces of my value proposition worth? Now that you have a pretty exact idea of the profile of the product that you're selling, you can start looking into your marketplace. You can start figuring out who it is that you're selling to. And the biggest question, obviously, aside from what is your product, is who is your customer? Where do you even begin with who is your customer? Well, for a lot of us on the small scale, we're going to start with a geography that's pretty close by. And the rule of thumb generally tends to be start with somewhere between 25 to 30 mile radius of where you are. I personally live and work within the Rockford area. Rockford is a north central Illinois small city. And so that's going to be sort of my geographic frame of reference for what we talk about over the course of today. These two circles represent 25 and 30 miles away. I've got a couple different cities and city sizes within there, a couple of different non-city, small-scale village areas, and that can give me sort of an idea of where I can market to initially just as a place to start. Is that going to be your end or your beginning? That's your beginning. This is just a scientific wild guess to start honing in on your marketplace. When you want to start getting a little bit more exact about it, start thinking about demographics as well. And all of these different demographics do play a role in informing purchasing decisions. You know, for example, household type, is it mom and dad with kids, or is it a single person? Is it higher education, higher income, ethnicity, foreign born, food preferences, what do they spend at home versus what do they spend going out to eat? Getting some information about who you expect to be your main customer is very, very valuable. Our main customer, for example, we sell at one farmer's market that's on a Wednesday morning. I don't, my wife does. And as a result, it's during a work day, so we didn't figure we'd get a lot of young working age people, and it's near a country club. So we expected to get some of the higher education, higher income retirees who had food preferences for local, fresh, and value-added stuff. So that's kind of where we began when we were doing our market research for that market outlet specifically. So you can use some of those pieces of information Or you can, if you haven't even begun marketing yet, you can start figuring out where the different types of people are using some online web services. One that's pretty beneficial as far as taking U.S. Census Bureau information and putting it into a useful dashboard. Foodmarketmaker.com is in a lot of states in the U.S., not every one of them, but in a lot of them. And what this allows you to do is map your potential clientele within your geographic area by all those demographic characteristics that I listed in the last slide, including food preferences. So you can see that I put my type of search as food preference, my subtype as average egg expenditure at home in Northern Illinois, and I can see by the colors in the different census tracts that the darker reds are going to represent a substantially higher egg expenditure annually than some of the lighter colors. So as would make some intuitive sense, as you get into the areas in the suburbs, northwest and western suburbs around Chicago, people have higher expenditures per year on eggs, partially because prices are higher, but also potentially because they have greater disposable income to use on discretionary expenditures like that. So this foodmarketmaker.com is a useful place to help narrow down that geography that we talked about earlier. So maybe it's not just that green circle around Rockford. Maybe my green circle needs to shift to the east another 30 or 40 miles in order to capture the customers that are going to provide premium prices. Psychographic, funny word for what do people believe. And all of these statements are statements that I've heard and could be argued to be true or untrue depending on your perceptions and experiences. Some people have high beliefs about local being fresher, organic being safer, free range tasting better. I mean, this kind of stuff is all fine and good, but you got to be careful to fulfill the desires for these kind of characteristics without distorting the facts. Try not to make any labeling claims that somebody from your health department is going to come in and say you can't necessarily prove that about your product. So go to the marketplaces that people believe what you're selling without saying that you're selling something that you're not, if that makes any sense. How do you know whether you're capturing these particular psychographics, these particular beliefs and behavior patterns? You gotta ask. This is one of those things where Midwesterners get a little shy going up to somebody and asking them about their preferences, about their habits. But there are simple ways to do it. E-surveys have really kind of matured into a very simple, cheap, portable tool. Google Forms and Typeform are two of my favorites. They're free, they're really functional. It can make a survey that you can have on your iPad, on your smartphone. You can carry it around with you. You could have it sent out via email through Facebook. You could even set up your own little kiosk at the farmer's market information booth and stand there with your iPad and ask if they want to take an egg survey. It's not that difficult to set up, and the information that you garner from that is going to be, instead of this third-party stuff that you get from the feds, this is going to be first-person research that you've done for yourself in the marketplace that you want to approach with the product that you want to sell. That kind of specificity has extraordinary value for someone who's trying to start up an enterprise. Remember, in addition, that it's not always the end consumer who is your customer. There are intermediary customers in some of the marketplaces that some of you will want to be selling into. So for example, grocery stores. What is the characteristics that they're looking for? What is the problem that they need to have solved? Do they need to get smaller deliveries more frequently? Do they need a product that has longer shelf life in order to reduce shrink? Do they want to just be able to charge more for a premium product in order to get some better margin on that? What about restaurants? Maybe they can't meet the minimum buying size from a larger scale distribution company. Maybe they're looking for something that has more flavor, more local flair, more terroir, better delivery time. That kind of service stuff also goes a long way with some of your intermediated marketplaces where you're not the person doing the final transaction to the end consumer. One of the most, so speaking of restaurants and retail stores, one of the most important decisions that you're going to be facing not only once, but as an ongoing consideration as you grow your enterprise is which of these market channels to use. And generally, you're not just going to have one answer, especially those folks who are trying to make decent part-time living off of a small-scale poultry enterprise. You're probably not just going to sell at one farmer's market and make all your money off of that. If you are, you have an extraordinary farmer's market and you're moving excellent volume. Farmers markets are a great place to start. They're a great place to cut your teeth on the marketing aspects of your enterprise. Low barriers to entry, but also a lot of time spent doing that. So farm stands, farmers markets, picks your own, that farm to consumer marketing. It's a great thing because you make the price, you get the margin, and the consumer is generally more aware of what it is that they're trying to buy from you. For those folks, as they grow into larger volumes, they may have a decision to make about moving away from selling at 3 or 4 or 5 farmers markets a week and moving into a place where they can sell a little bit more volume in order to make up that lower margin that comes with farm to firm type of marketing. So you'll explore all these different things throughout the growth of your enterprise in all likelihood. The questions you need to ask when you're choosing this market channel, and you've got to ask these of yourself regularly. Does it fit into your schedule? Could everybody sell at a farmer's market on a Wednesday morning? No, not if they're working a day job. Are you going to receive a sustainable price? And does that price actually have a reasonable return built into it for you? What are the marketing costs? Is there room for expansion and growth in the future? And can you compete with the existing players who are already in that marketplace? That is a major question that all of us have to answer. So don't automatically, what I guess I was trying to get at when choosing this market channel, don't think that direct to the consumer is the only option. It's a great place to start, but it's not always a place that, it's not where everybody ends up. Let's put it that way. So as far as marketplace, I showed you this before. This is where my egg buying consumers are in Rockford and to the east towards Chicago. Well, you can also use this tool to overlay the different retail stores right on top of that map. And suddenly you know the different retailers who are servicing the census tracts, who have the high expenditure egg consumers in Rockford and east of Rockford. Okay, now you've got some valuable market insight, valuable market information. These are potential competitors or potential market channels, potential partners for you in your moving of your poultry products. So do some reconnaissance. Pick an area and look at the retail stores in that area and kind of ask. You can walk into a retail, I love retail stores as far as a place to go and do market research while remaining relatively inconspicuous. You know, if you don't walk in there with a white lab coat and a clipboard, most people are just going to think you're a shopper. But look at what kind of products they have to sell. Do the marketing characteristics of those products match up with what it is that you'd like to sell? If you want to sell free-range eggs, do they already have free-range eggs? If so, are they free-range in a building or free-range outside? Will you be able to create a market differentiation for yourself with pasturing? Look at the packaging. Look at the messages that are on each of those packages. Also, positioning. What is the price? We talked about the different characteristics and attributes. What is the price associated with those different characteristics and attributes? And as far as market positioning is concerned, there's actual physical placement considerations in a retail store. Oftentimes, if you're either at the left side or the right side or at the top, that tends to mean that you're at a higher place in the continuum of products within this particular type of enterprise. So what is the actual physical positioning of the different kinds of poultry products in your marketplace? Then it's really not that hard to get at least a general idea, a ballpark estimate of what it is the retailer paid to the producer, to the wholesaler, to the broker, to whomever they bought that product from. If you can go into your store and you can subtract 30% from the sticker price, you have an approximate wholesale price that retailer was paying. It's not perfect, And there is a range around that, but at least it can give you a guesstimate of what the pay price is likely to be if you want to approach the person that is the manager of that refrigerated case. What kind of volume do they move? Unless you're going to stand there and watch people buy eggs or frozen chicken breasts or whatever it is for a long period of time, that's going to be something you have to ask somebody in the shop about. How much volume are they moving of the products with the different characteristics, and can you keep up with that level of demand if you're going to approach that kind of marketplace? So just to illustrate all of this a little bit more graphically, you walk into Walmart in my neck of the woods, and you walk in and you look at the egg case, or I look at the egg case and see what they've got available. Sort of at the bottom in the bargain basement area of that refrigerated display is their great value standard white large size dozen eggs. And you're going to pay somewhere south of $1 for that right now. 89 cents probably at a Super Walmart. But then they've got sort of their market branches. They've got their great value cage-free and their great value organic that you're going to pay more than that bargain basement price for. And then they've got Eggland's Best, sort of their more premium brand. And you've got cage-free. That cage-free might be the same price as the great value organic. You've got Eggland's Best organic, which is probably going to be a little bit more pricey than the great value organic. And then, more recently, you're going to start seeing some premium packaging, premium marketing claims, no antibiotics, vegetarian fed, free to roam outdoors, the Happy Egg Company, and then the Happy Egg Company Organic is going to be even pricier than that. So that one on the top left is going to be more like $6. The one on the top right is probably going to be $5. The great values are going to be in the $2 and $2.50, and the Eggland's Best are going to be somewhere in the middle. So you've got an interesting continuum that is created simply by looking at the branding, the attributes, and the marketing claims in that refrigerated case at the retail store. This could be done with poultry meat, this could be done with turkey, but this is a really nice case study in marketing attributes and what they're worth. Another thing you're going to have to be aware of if you're entering a marketplace is what farmers are already in that marketplace. There is a profusion of farmer finder websites out there nowadays, localharvest.org being one of my favorites. I can get on there and search for eggs near Rockford, Illinois, and come up with 57 listings of farms, farmers markets, and stores that all have eggs, and I can use that clickable link to then go and find their website for that individual farm to see what kind of production they're doing, what kind of characteristics they've got, and I can do all sorts of excellent farmer stalking, really, in order to create a better picture of what is in my marketplace and what it is I've got to compete with. Then, once you have an idea of the farmers in that geography, you can also kind of start meeting them in their natural habitat, which oftentimes in the local and small-scale farm type of marketplace is a farmer's market. So our friendly folks at the USDA AMS have local food directory listings. They have a great farmer's market finder with thousands of farmers markets on it. I search near Rockford, Illinois. I can search for individual commodities and then map the different farmers markets where people are selling eggs in the Rockford metro area. Okay, I now have this map of places that I can go and do my recon in order to figure out whether or not it's an appropriate market channel for me. So, go to the farmer's market. What's there? What isn't there? Possibly even a more important question. Again, using the eggs as the example, is this a $2.75 type of marketplace? Or is this a $6 a dozen type of marketplace? What are the attributes associated with the products that are there? Do they have nice packaging? Do they have reused packaging? Do you have to wash your eggs? Do you have to maintain a certain temperature on your freezers for your frozen poultry products? Is the price point sustainable? Is the amount of time a person has to spend loading, selling, taking down, and taking home sustainable? And once you've done sort of your initial walkabout, strike up some conversations. If you're still too shy to talk to the vendors, talk to the manager. You know, figure out who the market manager is. Ask them what kind of requests they're getting. What are people asking for in the poultry market? Would people love to see frozen whole chicken here? Would they love to see turkey breast? Would they love to see quail eggs? Would they love to see duck pate? I mean, what are the things that people are getting regular requests for? And then ask the managers about how much are you actually able to move and at what price point on a week-to-week basis. Talking to those vendors and talking to those managers is going to start up it's a business relationship, and in all likelihood a peer relationship that you will sustain over the course of your marketing existence in the poultry business. So really important to ask those questions, see what's there and what's not there. Farmers Market is also a right place to do some of that survey research, just potentially in a different form. If you didn't want to do the whole iPad on a kiosk thing or walk around and accost people who are trying to shop at the farmers market, maybe you just take a flip chart and you say, did you buy chicken today? If so, how much did you spend on that chicken? What are the characteristics that that chicken had that influenced your purchasing decision? I mean, clearly, if you're on a flip chart, it's going to have to be something pretty basic. How much did you spend on chicken? How much did you spend on eggs? What color were the eggs that you bought? Were the eggs that you bought organic? People like stickers, and they can give you a pretty robust data point for who's buying what at a given marketplace. Okay, so we've talked about product, we've talked about customer, we've talked about marketplace. Big piece of the puzzle, and it's a piece of the puzzle that frustrates people on a regular basis, is setting a price. Pricing is a continuum, it's a game, it's a science, it's an art. It takes some work before you really get to the place that you want to be and that you want to stay. But basically, when you're thinking about pricing, the price that you charge has got to be greater than your cost to produce and market that product. If you've gotten started and you're keeping some records, you should have a pretty darn good idea of what that is. If you haven't, you're going to need to estimate what that is likely to be. The price that you're charging also has to be either less than or equal to the customer's willingness to pay, WTP. That is an important data point as well. So your price has to fall somewhere in between that cost of production and marketing and that maximum willingness to pay in order to move the product that you're trying to sell. So those internal considerations on the part of your farm, what are your variable costs? So for me, I'm thinking about how much feed, how much labor, what is the supplies for packaging and stickers, my variable costs per dozen eggs that I sell. What's the overhead, the fixed cost, the utilities, the buildings, the tractors, things like that. And last but not least, marketing costs. People forget about marketing costs regularly. It does cost you something to go from your farm to whatever marketplace, stock something out, price something, stand at a farmer's market and sell. There are costs associated with all those things. And there's going to be costs associated externally with a couple other things that are going to have to be rolled into your price. The marketing channel margin. For example, if you're selling through grocery stores, what is that 30% going to look like when you end up with the sticker for the retail price? What are your competitors charging? Are you competitive with that when you factor in the margin? What's the willingness to pay of the customers that go to that store? And there's going to be a difference, the local IGA versus the Whole Foods or whatever. And the market positioning. We talked about that whole continuum of different types of products and different types of price points. So all of these things kind of have to be factored into this magic number that you wind up charging, and estimate when you start, go a little high, because it's a lot easier to reduce your prices than it is to increase them regularly for the course of the first several years of production. So like I said, don't forget your marketing costs. This is the Oklahoma Farm to School distribution cost template. It's this funky little spreadsheet that I found, and I love using it to calculate exactly what it is that it's costing me in order to market eggs in different kinds of market channels. So it asks you about the commodity, the unit, the sales price. So this example right here is my wife taking 40 dozen eggs to our local independent grocery store 4 miles away in our hometown. We're assuming a $10 labor rate. Is my wife worth more than $10 an hour? Yes, absolutely. The way I usually put these labor calculations into these kind of spreadsheets is to say, what would I pay a person to go and do this job for me? And so maybe that's not 10, maybe it's 13, maybe it's 15, but you can make that decision for yourself. You put in your vehicle information. I happen to be delivering in a Chrysler minivan as opposed to a large farm truck, so my miles per gallon is a little bit better. And then it takes all of that stuff into consideration, and it poops out this neat little distribution cost per unit of produce. So in this situation where I'm taking 40 dozen eggs 4 miles one way for that price at that labor rate, it's costing me about 26 cents per carton to market that. Now that doesn't sound too bad. And then you get that margin per unit at the bottom. You subtract your production costs away from that. So ours is somewhere between $2.50 and $2.75 depending on the time of year. And then all of a sudden it looks like I've got about a 50-cent margin net profit in what it is that I'm selling. Now, I could have told somebody it was 75 cents until I forgot about, because I had forgotten about those marketing costs. Now, you've got to control marketing costs just like you control production costs. So here's a scenario where it's the exact same situation, except I'm delivering 20 dozen eggs rather than 40 dozen eggs. All of a sudden, that exactly doubles my cost per unit distributed. So you have to think about how often you deliver, how much you deliver. That makes a real difference in what your actual margin is on the products that you're selling. And here's another scenario, and I've changed most things on here. So a higher price per unit, higher number of units delivered, and now that really long unloading time. So this is to represent my wife's 4 hours at the farmer's market. Okay, so all of a sudden we're going farther, we're spending more time, but we're also delivering more eggs at a higher price. So that distribution cost actually works out kind of well for us. And we like to move eggs that way. The problem is it's only 6 months out of the year up here in Northern Illinois. So it's not by virtue of the seasons situation, it cannot be our only marketing channel for our farm. Those chickens don't just stop at the end of the farmer's market season. So your price is also going to differ by your market segment. What do I mean by market? Market segmentation is basically creating a profile for the different kind of customers that you're going to approach. Is it primarily the sort of the hippie earth mother says shopping at the farmer's market for the most premium, cleanest product that she can find? Is it the millennial, more hipster chef with the tattoos who's doing the nose to tail kind of production and marketing for his joint in the hip downtown area? Is it the high-end grocery retailer in the suburbs that's selling to the urban professionals with no kids and a lot of disposable income? I mean, those are all going to be different price points for your products. I know for a fact what my price points, they would be different for those 3 different customers for my business. So that market segmentation allows you to create, so all of this market research that I've talked about can be repeated and modified for each of these different market segments that you're selling into in order to do a whole farm profitability analysis of which market channels are actually paying you the best for doing what it is that you do. And I actually hit my 40 minutes, which I'm kind of excited by. So
how about that?
How about that? The long and the
About
short of
that.
this, you guys, is market research is not rocket science. It's some very simple questions with some sort of time-consuming, pavement pounding approaches to answering them. So please do this research before you get started in your poultry product enterprise, and you're going to be much happier with the sort of financial results on your bottom line at the end of the year when you do your taxes. So thanks very much for your attention.
Andy, we appreciate the opportunity to have you come on and to speak to our group. I wanted to do at least one question for you. And out of the 4 P's that we had for marketing, how important is branding, do you feel, for the smaller producer? And there was a difference in price point between the Store Eggs and Eggland's Best and other brands that we saw in the commercial side. How much do you see branding for someone who may be targeting a farmer's market to have Farmer John's local egg?
So that's the 4th P, the promotion piece, I would say. Branding is just absolutely essential, in my opinion, Greg. Branding isn't just what kind of fancy pants packaging you can create for, or labels or anything like that for your product. It is the entire package of business image that you put forth in the marketplace. So what I would encourage as far as branding is concerned is have the font and the color scheme and the tone of voice that you use on your labels, have that match your website and have it match the signage that you use at the farmer's market. If at all possible, creating some consistency in that brand identity is going to create a vastly quicker recognition on the part of the consumer for what it is that you represent and what it is that your product is going to deliver to them. And in order for them to make that buying decision that much more quickly, having that recognition and that brand identity is going to be a key, clutch, important component of making sure that they can have that. So yeah, way, way important, Greg.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was hoping to hear, because I see a lot of folks that that they put all this effort into marketing their eggs, and yet they sell it almost as a commodity, a pile of eggs on a table, and I think they're missing the boat here in some respects. That continuity of theme that will be important, I think, in the future.
I agree, Greg. I've been amazed to see that some of the best eggs that you can buy in the state of Illinois, or the state line area in Illinois and Wisconsin, they are in recycled cartons with Avery labels with a bare bones minimum amount of information on there. And so that's fine. Yeah, farmers are actually kind of lucky, specifically in the local and specialty food market, that we can actually garner a little bit of I don't know if it's panache. I don't know if it's just forgiveness, because we're farmers. We're not large-scale corporations. We don't have the same kind of capacity to generate that imagery that somebody like Eggland's Best or whatever might, at least not right now. Nonetheless, there can be consistency in that marketplace, and I would say that at a farmer's market, especially where it's considered a premium place, at a place where there's a lot of competition with different physical and credence attributes, like in eggs, that branding is going to be essential in making yourself stand out.
Very important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Andy, I'm wondering about the marketing branding too with local restaurants. I know in Western North Carolina, here in Asheville, big foodie market, a lot of independent and local restaurants, and so you'll walk in and you'll see, they've got a relationship with a local hog farmer and a local beef farmer. So you'll see, mountaintop beef served here and there. So those farms are working with local restaurants and things to market those brands, as well as their own local marketing efforts.
Sure, and the restaurants that are doing that the best, so the restaurants is one of those weird scenarios where a farmer can deliver a product and then have absolutely no recognition for the end product that winds up on the plate. So you've got to have a nice relationship with that chef, sous chef, head of house, whoever it is, in order to make sure that your farm name and your product name, your product characteristics is ending up on the menu, because that's going to be something, in all likelihood, if it's the type of restaurant that is going out of its way to purchase and source local products, that characteristic is going to be of benefit to their customers as well. And if it's not the menu, maybe it's a table tent in the middle of the table where people are having dinner. And if it's not that, some of the restaurants that I've encountered, they adorn their walls with pictures of the farmers that they do business with. Now, talk about giving the consumer that sense of the local relationship. If you can have that kind of marketing relationship, if you can have your marketing message delivered at the point of the end consumption of a fabulously prepared product, everybody wins at that.
I think it plays back to, you were talking about the branding and the logo. When you have those things in place for your own product, whatever it is, lots of times on the menu, those restaurants are willing to put your logo there, along with a reference to where it came from. So.
And that identity that you create is going to be the result of all this market research that you do. I mean, the whole point of this webinar was to give you the ammunition that you need in order to be able to target a specific marketplace, a specific consumer at a specific price point, delivering all of the characteristics that they need in order to have their desire satisfied. So that's what market research does for you.
Well, with that, I would like to bring this to a close and invite you all to join us again next month on the 12th of December for a discussion about the Veterinary Feed Directive, which will be affecting farmers both large and small as to how therapeutics can be used within animal agriculture. So that will be again on December 12th. At 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so with that, I will bring this to a close. This has been a discussion here on E-Extension, and we thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
So long, folks.
Thank you so much.